The Sage of the Six Paths, Hagoromo Ōtsutsuki, is in fact incredibly powerful, probably stronger than you actually think, ironically. Now I know he is generally considered the strongest person within all of Naruto. However, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say he's at the Yuha Bark of the Narutoverse. He's beyond just powerful, he's a legend. Perhaps his legend is rooted in lore and somewhat exaggerated. However, for the sake of this video, we kind of have to use lore to find out how powerful he is, otherwise it's very difficult. Considering a lot of things he does comes from the lore, I hope you understand why. And yes, I am using the filler that explains Kaguya's backstory. You know, if you're just an anime enthusiast, somebody vibing to, Naruto content, or just anime content in general, it would be much appreciated if you could sub. Okay, let's get into this. He was a legendary godlike figure who's actually regarded as the ancestor of shinobi. And the reason for this is because he founded ninju, which led to the creation of a ninja world. As you all know, he is the son of Kaguya Ōtsutsuki. He's also twin brothers with Homura Ōtsutsuki. They were the first people to be actually born with chakra, and this made them incredibly strong even from birth. However, it's a little bit difficult to measure how strong they were, since anybody they fought against pretty much got beat up pretty casually. So their entire lives, Hagoromo and Homura had been pampered and didn't really know what was going on outside their little circle. One day they have an encounter with the great sage Toad, who is arguably quite powerful himself. Apparently he has eyes that transcend time. However, we don't really know if this is like a hyperbole or an exaggeration, since we do know he can see the future and make prophecies. However, he reveals to them that their mother isn't all that she seems, and that it's because of her that there is a god tree that is sucking up a life on this planet, and negatively affecting all life on the planet. Later, Hagoromo actually learns that his female interest has been killed via this god tree. So he's angered to the point he unlocks the Sharingan, and I kid you not, it's literally a fully matured Sharingan. So yes, Kaguya is exploiting these humans to create an army, and we all know why she's creating an army. From the threats of Kinshiki, Momoshiki, and Urashiki if you're using the anime. So yes, Hagoromo sets off on his training arc with the Great Sage Toad, learning Sage Mode, and feels now he's ready to take on his mother. However, his mother kind of manipulates his brother Homura, and they're forced to fight each other. A fight which is quite easy for Hagoromo. He seems to be the superior of the two brothers. However, Homura is being completely controlled, so he's relentless, and he keeps on going for Hagoromo. Hagoromo is forced to actually kill his brother, and with the death of Homura, he unlocks the Rinnegan. According to the data books, is the strongest ocular ability. Thanks to some plot convenience, he has a tag that's capable of reviving Homura, and together they fight against their mother Kaguya. The Divine Tree turns into the Ten Tails, and then it becomes a 2v2 essentially. A fight that lasts for months, so I'd assume that they are at least relative. Surely, right? There's no way you can fight somebody for that long and not be the same level as them, since it does seem like they're throwing attacks at each other. The Ten Tails even firing these laser beams. And it's amidst this, we see Hagoromo's Susanoo. That seems to be the largest Susanoo ever shown to date, literally being the same size of the Ten Tails in his second form. Now this isn't any ordinary Ten Tails, this one is a complete Ten Tails. So it's not missing certain Biju, and it should be as strong as Kaguya, since this Ten Tails is capable of fighting Hagoromo's Susanoo, and Hagoromo is capable of fighting Kaguya. But more interestingly, how strong is Kaguya? Well, we know that she's capable of destroying entire time spaces, her own time space. And her own time spaces are considered alternate dimensions, alternate time spaces, and even referred to as Ikai. And according to the anime's translators, this means parallel dimension.
Count that a parallel dimension exists.
If you want to lowball, these dimensions have day-night cycles, and actually shows these stars within the same time space, meaning it orbits a star at the very least. However, more realistically, these are dimensions parallel to Naruto's universe. It should also be considered that Kaguya has 6 realms, similar to the 6 realms within Buddhism, each being its own universe. Even when talking about the creation and destruction of Kaguya's dimensions, the term Zeshi is brought up, that is also related to Buddhism. So then the term Sekai becomes universe in this context. Similar to what Momoshiki makes, Isekai, which tends to usually mean, and also in a science fiction context tends to mean, parallel universe. And we know that's really all it can mean, since like other definitions say it's like a planet in size. However, we know it has a star within it, so it inherently needs to be bigger. Therefore, the only definition that makes sense is parallel universe, and is consistent with a few other things, which I will talk about later. And also it should be noted that Kaguya can create these dimensions, thread them, construct them, and make them, similar to what Momoshiki does. So how does destroying and making these relate to actual power generally? Well, we know if you can emit this kind of power, you're creating that much energy. And if we're using Newton's third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So whoever's emitting that much amount of energy can also take that amount of energy and also tank that amount of energy. And we all know Hagoromo can harm Kaguya, so he should have like near the same kind of power. Hagoromo in power ranges anywhere between large star level, all the way up to potentially universal and universal plus. And then apparently, according to law, using the last of his strength, he used a Shinra Tensei to seal his mother away, creating the moon, hurling it into the sky. Of course, this is something really casual, done by a fatigued Hagoromo, as really just sealing jutsu, and then regains his power. This could be consistent with the fact that the Ten Tails is a fragment of the God Tree that gave birth to the universe, or Tenchi, for example, typically used to refer to the universe, from top to bottom, earth and heaven, etc. You could say it's quite poetic if you want, however we do know it's consistent with other statements. It's also stated in the 4th data book that the Ten Tails is a progenitor of the universe, of Shinra Bansho, which very typically also means universe, literally meaning everything in existence, everything in creation. Hagoromo, after sealing his mother, absorbs the Ten Tails into himself, becoming his first Jinchuriki. So you can imagine he gets a massive increase. Since we've seen in the past, characters who actually obtain the Ten Tails and become his Jinchuriki do get significantly stronger. More interestingly, as he became a Ten Tails Jinchuriki, he was granted access to the Yin Yang release. More specifically, the creation of all things jutsu, which very specifically allowed him to become a god who was able to split light and shadow, operating as opposites, and he could give rise to all things in the universe, all matter. This being stated several times, and also written on the Uchiha stone tablet. And this is consistently brought up as law for the Sage of the Six Paths, the official Viz translation saying directly he could bring about all things in the universe. If you look at the kanji, it once again says Shinra Bansho, so using them hand in hand proves it means universe, all things in existence. And to finally solidify everything I'm saying, even within the Boruto movie novelization, it's stated that Naruto and Sasuke were like yin and yang, as if their power was born in their souls. The two conflicting forces that created everything in the universe. The two men were the very embodiment of that ancient legend passed down through the Uchiha. Of course, talking about Hagoromo and his Rinnegan. Whereas it should be noted that his two sons, Ashura and Indra, most likely surpassed him. Since take Indra, even before he had the Mangekyo Sharingan, he had inherited most of his father's power, and soon nobody would be able to compete with him. Now obviously I'm not talking about like abilities and hacks etc, but this isn't like raw power, speed, that kind of thing. And now that we're on the topic of a Yin Yang release, the creation of all things jutsu, we know that is a combination of both light and dark nature elements, and a progenitor of the Izanagi. The Izanagi being capable of bringing dream into reality. To use the creation of all things is to create any and all form from nothingness, to bring about all material in the universe. The ability to control all of creation. The Izanagi even allows one to rewrite their past, and even rewrite their death. So even if they die, they can rewrite that. So you can imagine being able to change all aspects of reality as if it was a dream is incredibly broken, and it doesn't seem to be limited. Hagoromo was capable of using it to split the Jubi several times over to create the Biju. It's even directly stated by Obito that he could create many things with it, that he was a god, and it was a mere application of his abilities. He was capable of making fantasy into reality. Jutsu like the Izanagi working in even delayed or frozen time. So if he's constantly able to use it, I would imagine that time is not really that relevant to him. It seems that the creation of all things jutsu was the original jutsu, the basis of all jutsu. Hence it's even stated that he could use all kinds of jutsu, that he could use all jutsu, which makes sense, since if he's seen a jutsu, he should be able to imagine any kind of jutsu. Even unbelievably broken jutsu like Kamui, which would allow him to be intangible. The possibilities are literally limitless. Another jutsu that's considered the counterpart of the Izanagi is the Izanami, which would be granted by the creation of all things passively, limitlessly. It allows one to punish those who cannot accept their fate, those who manipulate time to benefit themselves. It traps them in a time loop and makes them accept their fate. So yes, even those who manipulate time and probability are powerless against the likes of Hagoromo. He's pretty much granted to almost every ability shown in the entire show. He also has the sword of Nunobuko, which quote-unquote allows him to create and obliterate the world. There's an interesting feat he has in Naruto Shippuden, one that I'd like to address, since people get confused between these two feats, I think. Apparently there's a feat of him moving constellations and stars. I've never really seen any evidence for this. It seems to just be rumors, but I could be wrong. In my opinion, I think they've got confused with another feat. So in his later years, he gets quite old. He unfortunately gets a disease, and the only cure is the polar particles. Something he finds in a meteor he splits, and these polar particles heal him. However, just in case he decides to hide half on Earth, and sends the other half to other constellations. Now I would assume that he does this within a day, since he's pretty old, sick, needs to drink and eat. So even if you assume this, the feat is ridiculously fast, easily thousands of times the speed of light. And yes, this would fall under attack speed, so yeah, that's a pretty cool feat. So later in his life, he has to start preparing for his death, and is forced to remove the Jubi from his body and split into several pieces, using the creation of all things. So I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering, if he is some sort of god that can manipulate all aspects of reality, how come he dies? Well, it's most likely because he chose to die. He can see the future, as he did have Ōtsutsuki Byakugan. So you can say somewhat fatalistic for him to pass on his power to Naruto and Sasuke in the future. And so as he died, attentively watching over the people, he transmigrated his soul, walking through an eternity of samsara, an endless cycle of death and rebirth, and becoming even an anachronism of time itself, an oddity. So he somewhat transcends time, he can pass through it as a soul, or according to himself, he's a monk who wanders the world. And by world, I assume they mean universe, since world doesn't really make sense, since he's traveling throughout time, really. Which makes more sense in a Buddhist context, since this concept of samsara is brought up, and he refers to himself as a monk, as this being of chakra, crossing generations, and ascertaining the course of a ninja creed. He is somebody from a past, somebody already dead, yet also in the future. Each time he meets a reincarnation of Ashura and Indra, he's forced to give his power away, and seemingly re-obtains his power. So it seems he can re-bestow himself. Even more interestingly, he should be able to make these time remnants almost. So if you were to fight him and defeat him, it's very plausible that another version of him would come from either the past or the future to continue the fight. Which shouldn't matter, since even after not having the Ten Tails anymore, he's still able to use the Yin Yang release and the creation of all things, therefore can rewrite his death. Not that a being who's already dead and transcends death completely can die anyway. So he does have this interaction with the Pure Land, this afterlife almost. And when he talks to Naruto, upon bestowing him powers, the Six Paths powers, he tells him to consider himself in a space between reality and afterlife, within Naruto Ninja Storm 4. I'm not saying you should use this, but I think it's interesting to at least gain some sort of context. Then saying that he's a monk, who's come to watch and see how Ninshu ends, surpassing all generations, transversing this world with chakra alone. In conclusion, he's really powerful and lore-based, and ranges anywhere between the stellar and even cosmic tiers of power. But I think his main power really comes from his abilities and hacks. He's able to manipulate a lot of aspects of reality and causality, which even if he takes on opponents stronger than him, it would be really difficult to put him down. Especially because of a combination of being able to rewrite his death, being able to rewrite the past, having no limited amounts of him coming from a past to a future, reading his opponent's mind, learning their weaknesses, and being able to imagine anything, is incredibly broken, as you can imagine. Now, I know recently I have made a lot of power scaling videos, however you will see a lot more of them in the future, post-April hopefully. If that's the kind of content you like, and you want to see more of, it would be much appreciated if you could like the video and subscribe, so then at least I know there's some sort of interest in it. But regardless, thank you for watching this video, hopefully it was educational, and thank you for watching, peace out.